Today, we're jumping into the mind of a real giant of Western thought, Thomas Aquinas. And his project? Whoa, it was audacious. He wanted to build a bridge, between two worlds that looked like they were on a collision course, faith and reason.
So let's kick things off with, honestly, one of the greatest nicknames ever. When Thomas Aquinas was a student, he was this big, quiet guy, kind of kept to himself. And his classmates, well, they mockingly called him the dumb ox. But his teacher, the incredible Albertus Magnus, he saw right through it. He knew what was going on. He made this wild prediction, basically saying, you might call him dumb now, but this guy's ideas are going to shake the world.
Okay, so to really get what made this guy a genius, you have to picture the world he walked into. The 13th century, it was not a chill time for big thinkers. It was a full-on intellectual crisis. It was a battleground of ideas where everything people thought they knew about truth was starting to crack.
So what caused all this chaos? Believe it or not, it was the rediscovery of one single person from the ancient world. For centuries, most of his work was lost to Western Europe. But then, suddenly, the complete works of the Greek philosopher Aristotle show up. And when they did, they changed everything.
And I'm not kidding. This was a worldview bombshell. For hundreds of years, everything was understood through faith, through divine revelation. Then, all of a sudden, here comes Aristotle. He's got this complete, powerful system for explaining, reality. From physics to ethics, all of it just by using human reason and what you can see. It was a vision of the world that seemed to work just fine on its own, no creator God required. And that, right there, was a massive challenge to the entire Christian way of thinking.
Yeah, this really shows the clash perfectly. It's like two titans going head-to-head. In one corner, you've got the established view, coming from St. Augustine, which says that real truth comes from God, from divine light, and this physical world we're in, it's kind of just a shadow of what's really real. But in the other corner, you have Aristotle's challenge, and it completely flips the script. It says, nope, truth starts right here, with what you can see and touch. It says this material world is totally real, and we can figure it out using our brains and our senses.
Things got so heated that some thinkers came up with this, it was a pretty desperate idea called the double truth theory. The idea was that, hey, maybe a statement can be true in philosophy, but false in theology. True for Aristotle, but false for the Bible. For Aquinas, this was just no way. It wasn't a solution, it was giving up. It was an intellectual surrender. Because in his mind, if God is the source of all reality, how can there be two different truths? It just didn't make any sense.
So Aquinas comes along and says, I'm not picking a side. He refused to choose between Aristotle's reason and the Bible's faith. He totally rejected this idea of a divided truth. Instead, he decided to become an architect. He set out to design this amazing, magnificent intellectual cathedral where both faith and reason could live together, in harmony.
And this quote right here, this is the foundation of his whole project. For Aquinas, the logic was actually pretty simple. If God is the source of all truth, then how could a truth found by Aristotle looking at the world possibly contradict a truth revealed by God in the Bible? It can't. He believed that if it looks like there's a conflict, it just means we're not understanding something correctly.
And this is his blueprint, right here. It's brilliant. Reason and faith aren't enemies fighting each other. Nope, they're just two different paths, two totally valid pathways that start in different places, but, and this is the key, they both lead to the exact same destination. The path of reason, philosophy, it starts down here, on the ground, with what we can observe. The path of faith starts, a bit higher up, with what's been revealed by God. But they're both climbing the same mountain of truth.
Okay, so that's the big idea. But how does it actually work? What did he do? Well, Aquinas built a system where these two paths don't just, exist side by side. They actually help each other out. They complete one another. First, he wanted to show just how powerful reason can be all by itself. He came up with this idea called the preambles of faith. These are fundamental truths, like, for example, the existence of God, that he argued you can prove with logic alone. What does that mean? It means that believing in God isn't some blind leap in the dark. It's actually a rational step you can take. And his main tool for building this foundation of reason, a set of now legendary philosophical arguments. To show that God's existence makes logical sense, he didn't just give one proof. He laid out 5 of them. These are famously known as his 5 ways. So here they are, the 5 ways. We're not going to dive deep into all 5, but they all share a similar kind of logic.
let's just take the one from causation, for example. You see something happen, an effect, and you know it has a cause, right? Well, that cause had a cause, and that cause had a cause, and on and on. Aquinas said, look, that chain can't just go back forever. That's not logical. There has to be a first cause that wasn't caused by anything else, an uncaused cause that kicked the whole thing off. And that, he said, that's what we call God.
But, and this part is super important, Aquinas was not saying reason can explain everything. He knew it had its limits. It's like reason can get you to the base camp of a huge mountain. It can prove God exists, but it can't get you all the way to the peak. You know, the really deep mysteries like the Trinity or the Incarnation, those are just beyond what our logic can grasp. For that, you need faith. You need to accept what God has revealed.
And this quote, this might be his most famous line, and it just sums it all up so perfectly. Grace does not destroy nature, but perfects it. In other words, faith doesn't come in and wreck what our human reason has built. It completes it. It makes it perfect. The house analogy is great for this. Reason builds the solid foundation in the walls, but grace is like the roof that makes it a complete home, that points it toward the heavens. So this grand project, this blueprint for harmony, what happened with it? Did it stick around? The answer is a huge yes, but not without a little bit of drama first.
I mean, check out this roller coaster. Just 3 years after he dies, some of his big ideas are officially condemned. They were seen as way too radical, relying too much on this pagan philosopher Aristotle. But then, less than 50 years later, the church does a complete 180 and makes him a saint. And after that, his influence just exploded. He became, you could argue, the single most important thinker in the history of the Catholic Church. His big idea, that synthesis of faith and reason, it became the absolute foundation of Catholic theology for centuries to come. But his work reached way beyond the church. His concept of natural law, this idea that we can figure out basic morality just by using our reason, has had this huge lasting impact on everything from modern law and ethics to political science, even today. And really, that brings us right back to today, because the fight that Aquinas was dealing with back in the 13th century, it sounds really familiar, doesn't it? We still live in a world where science and faith, reason and religion seem to be locked in this constant battle. So the question he leaves us with is a big one. Does his blueprint for harmony, his idea of two separate paths that lead to the same single truth, could that still be the key for us today? Now that is something to chew on.